this is the 6th year we are having this project. I have mentioned that it's coming to an end. We, during its inception in 2017, the Law Society carried out a baseline survey that was aimed at determining where the project would be located. And in Kenya, we settled on Kwale County because there are so many mining activities within this county. And that is why we are here today. This project has seen many activities go on, and we have achieved quite a number of things. We've been able to develop some legislations. For instance, the amendment of the Succession Act 2021, the draft community agreement guideline that has now been adopted by the government of Kenya, among other laws. So can we appreciate ourselves for that?
The Supporting Inclusive Resource Development Project, as the CEO has indicated, was a 6-year project which started in the 2017 with the Law Society in collaboration with the Canadian Bar Association in the East African region, specifically Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, and working closely with the law societies in these countries. And the project has 2 expected intermediate outcomes. 1, increased engagement of the East African law societies to advocate for law reform to reflect the principles of transparency, gender sensitivity, and accountability in the extractives industry. And secondly, increased community participation, particularly of women, to advance and protect their rights related to the extractive industries. And it's imperative that we note that this project is funded by the Global Affairs Canada, who we thank for their partnership and collaboration. Now, as Florence has mentioned some of the interventions of the law, but I also have to mention that the SRD project, with assistance from the Law Society of Kenya and the Canadian technical experts, reviewed and submitted comments on various legal instruments that we have developed in Kenya. 1, the strategic plan 2018 to 2022 of the mining sector, and that's a hint that we still need to review the strategic plan post 2022. The draft gender strategy and action plan, the draft Kenya National Mining Institute bill, the draft community development agreement guidelines, the draft model community development agreement, the draft mining local equity regulations 2019. Further, in the year 2022, as Florence has mentioned, interventions were also made on the bill that became law, the Law of Succession Amendment Act of 2021. So without a doubt, this sad project has had great impact in our communities and has had a great impact in the law reform agenda. A policy paper on resettlement action plans, RAP, and asset valuation index in Kenya has since been developed, and a bill thereafter, and the same will be presented to Parliament, and through the President will be working to ensure that it becomes law. So it's without a doubt that we have made tremendous strides towards impacting on our communities as a whole, and it's without a doubt that working together under this project has positive benefits. And as we look at future areas of collaboration such as climate change and climate transitioning, gender and human rights, we want to say that this project has made a positive impact on the lives of people, not only in Kenya, but in the East African region, in mining, in gender sensitivity, and that we look forward to future collaboration and working together as a team.
So today is a great day. We are all gathered here to assess the progress that has been made by all of the law societies and the implementation of the Supporting Extractive Resources Development SAD project within East Africa region for the last 6 years. The SAD project has over this period increased sustainable economic growth for East Africans, and particularly for women and the vulnerable groups affected by the activities in the extractive industries. Some of the interventions have been mentioned before by the able CEO and Vice President of the Law Society, but significantly, there's been an increased engagement of the East African law societies to advocate for law reform to reflect the principles of transparency, gender sensitivity, and accountability in the extractive industries. And may I give an example in Kenya, where the Law Society SAD project is helping the Ministry of Mining to develop the draft gender mainstreaming strategy and its action plan, that is for the year 2023 to 2028. And there is also a draft bill, model law for resettlement action plan, Bill 2022, that is in the pipeline. And I just want to echo the commitment that had been made by the Vice President that the leadership of the Law Society will work with the ministry to ensure that this bill is enacted. Further, we have seen an increase in community participation, particularly of women engaging in consultations, dialogue, negotiations, and advocacy, and as well as other initiatives to advance their rights are related to the extractive industries. Again, I give an example. In Kenya, we've had many legal aid clinics and women advocacy from the year 2018 to December 2022. These have all been done within the project in Kwale County, and of course with your generous support. So as we gather here today, we will also be discussing matters climate change and the role that communities play to promote and address gender and rights implications with regard to climate change. And this discussion, of course, could not have come at a better time. Kenya, the East African region, and the world, and Africa in general, are just grappling with the question of intense drought or longer periods of drought, severe heat waves, changes within the ecosystem, rising of the sea level, and increased floods. All these effects can be attributed to the failure by all of us in failing to take care of our environment. And we hope that in this regional conference, we will also, as lawyers, come up with suitable recommendations that will help us to address some of these effects. During this conference, it is imperative to see and address some of the key recommendations that were arrived at the COP27 in November 2022 in Egypt.
The said East Africa project, implemented over the past 5 years, has had tremendous impact in communities in Kwale, Bulisa, Geita, the East African community generally, and among lawyers, paralegals, and other stakeholders across the region. As we transition from inclusion extraction to focusing more on environmental accountability and environmental justice, I call upon all of you to actively participate and be involved in climate change discussions. Lawyers and law societies will, in the next decade, play an important role in shaping global debate and direction when it comes to climate change. You cannot be left behind in these discussions and the greater global energy transition agenda. These discussions begin here, and I encourage you to, over the course of the next 3 days to share freely and use your voice to contribute to shaping the future of our climate change and climate justice engagements in the various EAC partner states and the region. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, allow me to once again congratulate you all for your contribution in one way or another to the success of the said East Africa project. We will not be here today were it not been for your hard work and determination to achieve the goals of the project. Special appreciation goes to the Canadian Bar Association, officials of the Law Society of Kenya, Uganda Law Society, and the Tanganyika Law Society, the East African community for their selfless contribution to the successful implementation of the project.
From the minister perspective and the Kenya government perspective, we would like to say that mining is a current stage of this government. And as we say in the mining industry, anything that is not mined, anything that is not grown is mined. And look around you, and you'll find most of the stuff around you are mined.
This project is important to Canada for many, many different reasons. There is, of course, most importantly, the intrinsic value of it. But it is very well aligned with our priorities. It's been mentioned that we have a feminist international assistance policy. Everything we do is looked at through a gender lens. When there is gender balance and when women lead development projects, it's proven over many, many years that they're more successful. So while our objectives may sound very noble, and I like to think they are, having a feminist international assistance policy and doing development through women and women's economic empowerment just makes good sense as well. Finally, I'd like to recognize the Canadian Bar Association and Vice President John Stefaniak, who is here from beautiful Winnipeg. I know, John, you personally have invested a lot in this project, having come to this region numerous times, and many of your colleagues have as well. And for me as a Canadian, it's really heartening and encouraging to see our Canadian Bar Association so actively involved, and their members, the various lawyers and advocates from across Canada, including eminent ones. This is the first time I've heard Casey after somebody's name, which means, for those of you who don't know, you probably all do, King's Counsel, which is the same as, what is it in Kenya here, special counsels? Yes, senior counsel. So that same kind of recognition. So our very best are coming to you to work together and collaborate for very positive outcomes.
The project has also facilitated the creation of broad-based platforms of government, community-based organizations, national NGOs, and the women miners themselves for strategic and policy discussions. And this model of co-creation of policy amongst representatives, all the affected stakeholders, it's a hallmark of the policy work done under this project, and it will continue as a model well beyond as well. Another highlight is through public education, pro bono lawyers and paralegals, and strengthening referral pathways. It's allowed women to be able to participate more actively in advancing and protecting their rights at the community level, as well as improved access to public and legal aid services for communities impacted by extractive industries. I mentioned yesterday at the reception that the project has created many ripples in the pond, and those ripples continue to move and create influence. And those ripples, you throw two stones in a pond, interact with other ripples that others are making, and it's interesting, exciting to see what the end results can be. But by ensuring that, as the project has, that even a small group of women are aware of their rights and supporting them in asserting their rights has meant that the information has spread throughout their communities. And from the project, we've seen the creation of support networks and the involvement of more and more individuals affected by the extractive industry. And they're coming forward to speak out for themselves. The engagement of mining companies as stakeholders in the project has also helped ensure that communities have the ear of those mining companies and can make themselves heard and make it clear to them that people claiming their human rights are here to stay, and those rights have to be respected. So now a little bit about my own personal experience with CERD. First off, why did I volunteer for the project? My initial participation was in 2018. I've had the opportunity to come to East Africa on 4 occasions. I saw what the work the CBA was doing in other international initiative projects. And I saw and knew individuals had been involved as volunteers, as Canadian technical advisors in those projects in Vietnam, supporting development of governance of the legal profession, in South Africa, educating administrative courts, administrative tribunals, in Nepal, helping to establish legal systems after the change from monarchy to Republican government. And for me, when this program came about, it was a perfect fit for many reasons. It was an opportunity for me to re-engage with the Canadian Bar Association. I'd been a very active volunteer for many years.
The Law Society's CERD programs worked closely with established community-based organizations in each pilot areas. Together they provided training programs, publication programs, worked with local leaders on community empowerment, provided legal services to local groups and to individuals through paralegal programs and through the provision of pro bono lawyers. So that's the aspect that I'm primarily going to focus on here. And that's also the greatest number of outcomes that I've collected in this evaluation process have been in relation to the work that CERD did in these 3 pilot communities. So I'm going to summarize here just some of the main themes that came out of that evaluation in the communities. The most striking thing that emerged from the community interviews and feedbacks was not one specific outcome or one specific result, but rather, I would say, the overall contribution made by CERD to the empowerment of those communities, and most especially to the empowerment of women in those communities. This point was made over and over again by informants from all of the 3 pilot areas, both from women leaders themselves and from other people involved in the project who went to the pilot areas and observed what was happening. If I may quote one of the women leaders that I interviewed for the evaluation, quote, "After training from CERD, women realize they have a right to be a human being." I think that's an astonishing result to attribute to the project. That particular woman leader was from Bulisa district in Uganda, but the same message came back from interviews here in Kwale and from Geita in Tanzania. Women stated over and over again that they went from having no ability to speak in public on their own behalf and basically no engagement really in their communities beyond very basic things like their children and so on, to developing the confidence to speak out for themselves, to advocate for themselves, and to advocate for others, especially women in their communities. So it was very clear from the evaluation that women are now participating in community events and activities in a way that never happened before CERD. And it's also clear that women who participated in CERD trainings and activities took their new knowledge and skills out into their communities and continued to spread them with the other women in the communities and families and other community members. So here are just a few examples. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few points of what happened when women were empowered by supports and trainings provided through CERD. First, CERD contributed to the creation or expansion of a whole range of women's advocacy and support groups across a wide range of issues in all three countries. This ranged from the creation of new formal CBOs, NGOs, to the support and growth of small village women's collectives. Secondly, women empowered by CERD were elected or appointed to a range of positions in local government or government bodies that affected what was happening in their communities. Here in Kwale County, CERD-trained women created the Miembeni Borehole Women's Group, who initially fought successfully to have Base Titanium drill a borehole to provide a fresh water supply after local water was contaminated, and then went on from there to advocate for many other issues for their community. I'm not sure, but we may be hearing from a member of that group a little later. Another example, in Geita, Tanzania, a CERD-trained woman leader who was an artisanal miner created an association of women's miners, which now has membership well over 200, who fought initially against the exclusion of women by men from artisanal mining areas. The group was eventually so successful in its advocacy that it was granted a piece of land for the use of its members from Magusu Miners Cooperative Society, an enormous step forward from a situation where women were driven out of mining areas by male miners who said that they would bring bad luck and should not be allowed in. The same miners group, I'll just advert back to something that John Stefaniuk said, has at least started, although there's still much more work to be done, to get its members to use protective equipment to protect them from toxic substances like mercury used in small-scale mining, and to use other safety equipment in their work. In Bulisa district in Uganda, the Ngwedo Women's Group, which was started by CERD-empowered women, successfully petitioned Total Energies to commit to hiring community women for their local operations. Despite initial opposition from the husbands of women in Bulisa, many women have since been hired and are working for Total, and their earnings are helping their families, helping to pay their schools' children fees, allowing some of them to invest in other small business ventures, and even to beautify themselves. If I can just quote one of my friends that I met in Bulisa, "We used not to be able to plait our hair, but now we can plait and our husbands love us more." That was one of my favorite quotes from the interviews. Now, as I said at the outset, outcome harvesting is not just limited to finding planned results. The results I talked about there mostly fit within the goal of doing things related to extractive industries. And that was CERD's specific goal. However, it was very clear that there was a tremendous spillover effect in the communities from this women's empowerment, and much of that feedback did come through the evaluation exercise. Women leaders who gained confidence and participated in public advocacy through CERD have gone on to tackle many other issues in their community. To list just a few, they've credited their CERD's help and their empowerment with helping to reduce child labor, improving school attendance for children, in one case even the building of a new school, local school, fighting against sex and gender-based violence, fighting for women's family and inheritance rights, encouraging people to pursue alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, and a whole range of other issues. So the empowerment that flowed from the work that CERD did has taken quite deep root in the communities beyond just the immediate issues of the extractive industries. And I think it's very important to note that and collect it.
So in closing, I know I mentioned this during my opening remark on the first day of the conference. I would just like to thank you for the opportunity and great pleasure and honor it has been for me to participate in the program and to meet many of you and to attend the regional conferences because what small amount I may have contributed, I've taken back in far greater measure in terms of personal fulfillment. So thank you all, and in keeping with tradition, it would be appreciated if someone could come up and lead a closing prayer.